So Netflix's The Silence, and I didn't want to compare this film to A Quiet Place. It's not fair, because this film more than I'm sure there's like other horror films out there that do have society collapses and there's monsters that can only track you by sounds. You have to be very quiet. Um, but man, the similarities are too big here to ignore. Okay, so you have society is collapsing because there's an attack of some ancient creatures that have been unleashed. They're called the Vesps. They've apparently been unearthed from some ancient cave, and now they're just destroying the populace. They're attacking humans left and right, and society is collapsing around them. And so Stanley Tucci plays Hugh Andrews, who has to lead his family. That includes his kids. His kids and his elders, and he has to kind of escort them to safety while the world is collapsing around them. And man, it collapses fast. It isn't long before they see news reports about everyone freaking out about these Vesps. Like we don't even see them for most of the film. We see like a glimpse of them in the beginning, and then don't see most of them until like around like the halfway point of the movie. So we're just watching like society collapse. Okay, it's a typical society collapse film. We're introduced to the family a little bit, and then they see news reports and they freak out and they got to get in the car. And then there's people have become desperate. And they're holding shotguns to each other and they're saying, "Get out of the car! I need your resources." And it all happens pretty quickly here. And there are news reports where they lead hints to it saying like, "Don't make a sound. Everyone be quiet. Just get away from these things. Get away from these vests." Now, when they build this up, my initial thought was like, okay, well, these Vesps, they must be something really terrifying. It must be something like, kind of like a Quiet Place, where, when you first saw the monsters, they were huge. They had, big, arms that could like slice right through you. They had these very they had these big mouths and like no eyes. They seem very, very scary looking, and they're very big, and you couldn't just like shoot them. Like they took a lot to really kill these things. And they were fast too. They came out of the woods. They just swipe you up just like that. It was terrifying, and it was intimidating. But with the Vesps kind of look similar to the creatures from like A Quiet Place, except for the fact that one, they can fly, and two, they're very, very small. They look like kind of like baby pterodactyls. In fact, I think I read somewhere that apparently the reason they're called Vesp is because it's in relation to the word wasps, I think, in Spanish, or like akin to something like that. Because yeah, they do. I guess they kind of look like they have like kind of like a bee mentality if you kind of like look at the way they behave and stuff like that. But the thing is, like, the Vesps, they really don't seem that intimidating. I mean, yeah, if you get them together in like a group and stuff like that, they do seem a little bit terrifying in that presence. And I mean, I don't want to be like this like nitpicky about like the way they're designed, but the Vesps, they can be killed pretty easily. In fact, there's a scene where they show how easy it is to kill them because they're attracted to sound, and because they seem small enough and stupid enough, you can attract them to stuff that'll kill them easily. Kind of like a bug zapper type deal. At one point, they turn on a wood chipper, and and I'm not kidding, I think they show this in the trailer too. All the Vesps just fly directly into the wood chipper. Like, they don't even have to lead them there. They just flip it on, and then they just all go into the wood chipper and just turn into little bits of mush. They're really easy to kill. Like, you just like shoot them pretty good. And I mean, like, I think a few of the characters just have like pistols and shotguns are able to like easily take out a few. I mean, yeah, if you get like a swarm of them, it's tough. But you kind of got to look at that, and because you have that wood chipper scene, then you start questioning things you shouldn't be questioning about like the Vesp. Like, like obviously if you think about a zombie apocalypse, one of the first things you'll probably think of is like, okay, they're slow, that they want to munch brains, but they're very slow, they're very fragile and brittle. Yeah, if they're in a group, they might be able to swarm you, but you could generally kill them off pretty quickly. And if they wandered out into nature, chances are like some bears or mountain lions would rip them to shreds just easily. So because you have that wood chipper scene, like, okay, well, why wouldn't you just get a bunch of wood chippers then? Or just like a bunch of big bug zappers that made a bunch of noise and stuff like that, because they seem really easy to kill. And that's where you get into this territory where it's kind of like, it's like A Quiet Place meets The Birds. They even have that kind of like The Birds sequence where they kind of walk out into the scary outdoors, and there are all the vesps, and they're all like sitting on they're all sitting on like the electrical wires. They're perched up on houses and stuff like that, and you're just like quietly moving about, and you don't want to disturb them. It's just, and then it goes through like a few of the motions you expect from this type of film, including going back to the relation to A Quiet Place. You have a daughter who's deaf. Except it doesn't seem like they quite go that route with her, because like they're still talking quite a bit. It feels like people have to be quiet, but still not too quiet. I mean, A Quiet Place got away with a little bit of it. They tried to really force the quietness that you needed to avoid these monsters. But in The Silence, it seems like, as long as you're in like a relatively quiet indoor place, you should be okay, as long as your phones don't go off or anything like that. So they can talk openly, so we don't really have that kind of lack of dialogue. That was kind of in A Quiet Place. And I wish there was a lack of dialogue too, because even like, I mean, they showcase, okay, yeah, the girl, she's not entirely deaf. She does have a little bit of hearing, but she has loss of hearing, so that when we do get her perspective, we kind of hear like just like muffled sounds of the monsters around here, which I gotta admit, it's not too bad. But you can't shake that feeling, because the thing is, The Silence is not too terribly directed. There are some neat sequences here and there. Things get a little bit interesting where you have this kind of like creepy reverend who, basically, the way this goes. He has his own collective, and he comes to the family. He says, hey, we should join together. We need to repopulate the world. I notice you got some women in there. Maybe we can, have our way with them. And then they say no, and then a fight breaks out. So the usual type of like end of the world type scenario stuff here. The direction, it's not too bad. I like the way some of the scenes are set up, but like some of the visual effects just really really become like, you really don't believe it at times, especially with like how many of the vesps they have in some of the scenes where they have to swarm characters. Like it really takes you out of the film at that point. But I mean, there's some competent direction here. I like some of the bloodiness of it. I love when the vesp attack. There are a few cool sequences in here. But there are a few cool sequences among the familiar tropes, like stuff we've seen this type of stuff before. We've seen these types of characters before. There's a few little twists in here, like how the vesps are able to multiply so easily. How do you attract them? How do you get away from them? There's a little bit of comedy there. It's just like these characters are mostly stock. They go about the usual tropes that you expect from this type of story. That it kept taking me out of the film. That and the vesps, they don't seem that intimidating. It's like watching The Birds. It's just it's birds, except they can eat you just a little bit faster, So for The Silence on Netflix, 2 out of 5 stars.